Morning. We are reading from John 21, verse 15 to 19. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone will dress for you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Amen.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. So, Huub, yeah, maybe you can share.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be able to bring this sermon to you. It is actually a sermon that God gave me about 30 years ago when I was with Youth with a Mission. And we were going to Hungary for a field trip and were asked to prepare some testimonies. And I was praying about it and I received a story, but I had to tell, sorry, this is not quite a testimony. I think it's a sermon. Expected to be told off and say, try again. But my small team leader nodded and said, go for it. So this is the story on John 21. And at that day, when I preached, it aligned very much with the message of the preacher of that day. And since then, I have preached this sermon several times, and every time a little bit different. You pray about it, the audience change, so I had to change it also. It is very much about the story and about understanding these kind of dialogues in the Bible. So first, there will be some, let's say, teaching about how to understand such a dialogue, and then we'll continue with getting into the message and applying it to our life. I will share my screen, and of course you can shift a bit between speaker view and the presentation. This is not the right one. Stop share. Share screen. There it is. So the title is A Remarkable Conversation, and it's a bit also about dialogues in the Bible. So the main question is, why does Jesus ask 3 times, "Do you love me?" to Peter? There could be several reasons, because, well, it's a strange question. If you expect Jesus to know the hearts of people, as is taught in the Gospel several times, why would he ask? Does he not know? Secondly, does he like to hear it? It's like, if we ask the question, "Do you love me?" it's generally either we doubt it and need to be reaffirmed, or just because we like to hear it that somebody loves us. So is there anything like Jesus needing our love, and that's why demanding it? I don't think so, but there may be other reasons, because it may be necessary for Peter to say it. There's also a reason why we want people to confess something literally. Sometimes you know somebody has done something, but in order to get a relationship straight, it's necessary that a person confess to what they have done. And that can be if somebody did something wrong and tries to hide the fact, or because once somebody has confessed to what they are doing, you're on speaking terms again, and there's an open relationship. Even if there have been mistakes made, okay, it's clear, you've done this, so now we are going to see how to continue the relationship, how to restore it. So it may be very much the need of Peter to say it. And very important also to understand it, you have to link it with earlier events. What happened before? And in this role, we are going to be a detective, looking at what happened, details of what happened before. So it is a bit of an interesting detective story. So if you want to understand the discussion, first of all, you need to know what has happened before. What are the events that led up to this conversation? Okay. Secondly, what exactly has been said? It's not about the general flow of the statement, but what are the words? Is there something really striking? What exactly has been said in the conversation? And sometimes you need actually to go into the Greek in order to understand things. Sometimes there are very striking and important details. In any Agatha Christie or Poirot story, there are a few details that only the detective will spot, but will give the clue to understand the story. Also, you need to have a background. Who is saying what kind of character is this? It is different when Peter says something, or Thomas says something, or John says something. And you need to have a general understanding of the culture also. What is the background? So these are the things that you really need to understand a discussion. I can try to make an example. The first two conversations in the Bible is the conversation between the snake and Eve, and then the conversation between God and the man and the woman. In that story, Eve seems to repeat what God has said, but if you have a real close look at it, actually she changes the wording and the meaning. The snake says that it is forbidden, and then snake said, as you can't eat from any tree. No, Eve says it's only this tree we may not eat and not touch it, otherwise we will die. It's a change of what God has actually said. So you have to be very clear about what. The next event is a detail. It's important. She gives to the man who stood by her side. So Adam was definitely present. So it's an important detail. It's not just the woman, it's the man who's next to her. And then it continues in the second conversation, and Adam is called to tell what happened, and he immediately starts blaming God, shifting the blame by saying, well, the woman, blame shifting one, that you have given me, blame shifting two. Yeah. So if you go into that conversation by seeing what has really been said, what are the details, etc. Okay, we'll try to do this also with this conversation. So what went before? Generally, we see often that people go back to the denial of Peter, and that is an important step because there's 3 times a question, but also 3 denials. Interesting detail. It's denial next to a fire. So Peter is warming himself and is asked 3 times, hey, you were with this man. And 3 times he says, I don't know what you're talking about. I do not know this man. And then, of course, we hear crowing. After the 3rd time, just as Jesus had predicted or told Peter. And that's where we get in the even earlier passage. Jesus says, where I'm going, you can't follow me, announcing his death. But there, Peter actually promises Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus' response is, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So it is very much about Peter's question, I want to follow you. It's important. Jesus needs to be followed, and Peter understands, and I will follow you. Even where Jesus says, you can't follow me, still Peter says, I will follow you. And then there's the announcement, you will deny me. As a response to, I will lay down my life for you. And this is exactly what happens. Actually, the wording of to follow is important, because when Jesus is arrested, it's clearly written that the disciple that Jesus loves knows someone at the high priest's court, and they sneak in, following Jesus. And because he follows, actually gets himself in a situation that he's not strong enough to face. He cannot be asked the question and dare to answer, yes, I am one of his friends. He denies Jesus actually. Which was quite a bad thing, because Jesus had announced that those who deny him would be denied in the final judgment. It's not just, okay, you can make a lie or a promise for. There are no white lies, basically. It's no possibility to say, okay, I needed to say this in this situation, but I didn't mean it. I crossed my fingers, so it doesn't count. No, it's a denial, and the effect of this is actually, Jesus said, if you deny me, I will deny that I know you. So there's definitely a deep breach of relationship here because of the denial. Okay, some children, also a very long time ago, I did a story with them, and they made very nice drawings. And to interest you and keep track of the story, I will use these drawings again and some other visual enhancers of the story. So, and also go back to the story itself. So, now after some appearances of Jesus, the story continues with, afterward Jesus appeared again to his disciples at the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So basically they go back to their old occupation, and rather than being fishers of man that they've been made into, they become fishers of fish again. But to no avail, because they catch nothing. A whole night of fishing on the lake, not so late in spring, so early spring, so it may have been quite cold, as I know it can be in Israel at night. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out at them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. So here is a story which continues with a man asking, how did you catch anything? And of course, as a fisher, it's not nice to say, no, we didn't catch anything. You will be the source of the object of mocking, basically. But then they get this suggestion from someone standing on the shore. The Dutch proverb, de beste stuurlui staan aan wal. The best men at the steering wheel stand on the shore and say, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And they do so, and there are so many fish because they catch a lot. And it reminds us of another story. And if you see the small camera, you will be able to see this. There's also another story of Jesus and catching lots of fish. So there's the second story. This is the second time, at least, or third time, that they catch a lot of fish. It must have reminded them of the other time when they were actually invited to join Jesus because they were fishing and they caught an enormous load, so much that the net ripped. And that's the moment actually that they hear, I will make you fishermen of men. So you will fish for men. You will be evangelists. You will save people by bringing them my word. And this is another big catch. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, have you got any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. Remarkable thing to do. The disciple whom Jesus loved said, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. And you can understand, you put away your clothes because if they get wet, you will get cold. So basically they're fishing into their underwear. And as Jesus is there, he covers himself and jumps in the water. Remarkable behavior. I jump. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, because they were not far away from the shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there, with fish on it, and some bread. And probably again another reminder of another story. The story of how Jesus multiplied 2 fish and 5 loaves that the little boy brought, and they had a most awesome picnic. So another memory of who Jesus is and what he's capable of doing. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Again, interesting thing. Jesus in his own jumps back into the boat and dragged all by himself the net ashore. And if you think that most of the fish you catch in the Lake of Galilee are, well, between a pound and a kilo, but even maybe a little bit heavier, so it's quite a job. He was a strong guy, a hard worker. Is he trying to prove anything? So there's the fire, there's the fish that the disciples have brought, there's the fish that Jesus also had and the bread on it. So interestingly enough, he has bread, he has fish, but also asks for the contribution that the disciples have to bring. The fish that they have caught. He easily could have multiplied the fish and the bread that he had, but he really accepts the fruit of their hard work under his guidance. Because when they went out of their own initiative, they caught nothing. But when God provided, they caught a lot. It's also God providing them not catching anything, I think, because it brings them into a frame of mind that helps them realize how dependent they are on Jesus. And then we have the reading. And we've heard it before, 3 times the question, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs. Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to them, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then, very interesting, he comes back to the original question, I will lay down my life for you. Right? You can't follow me now, but you will follow me. When you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your arms and someone else will dress you and lead you where you not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. So the original question was, why can't I follow you? I will follow you everywhere. I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus here says, yes, you will lay down your life for me and you will follow me. And it's quite clear that in these words, the relationship between Jesus and Peter is restored. He is not anymore a fisher, he becomes a shepherd. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. The most precious thing that Jesus has on this earth, the people that belong to him, and he calls them his sheep, his lambs, he entrusts to Peter. And he gives him permission to follow him, even unto death. So there's quite an enormous depth to these words, I think. Now there is this man who has been given, promised the keys of the kingdom, also be entrusted with the disciples. There is a special task for him. Okay? So if you get really close to the questions and answers, Jesus starts to ask with, do you love me more than these? And Peter responds with, yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. There is the promise of Peter also, even if everybody would turn you down and leave you, I will stick to you. So I love you more than the other ones. Even if everyone is unfaithful and leaves you, I will stick with you. Again, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Third question, do you love me? Lord, you know all things, you know that I love you. But if you go into the Greek, it gets deeper. More than these, do you agape, the word of love that God has for us, the word of love the Lord your God. There is the word also agape used. But Peter responds with phileo, and it's close to the word of brother. I love you with the love of a brother, which is generally considered a simpler, more human type of love than agape, which is godly love. The question is repeated, do you love me, agape? And Peter says, I love you with phileo. Thirdly, do you love me? Do you phileo me? And this saddens Peter because even his phileo, that he can actually speak out, that he dares to speak out, is questioned. But he can say, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Peter thought he knew himself. And he thought he could cope with the situation in the high priest's court. But he couldn't. He did not know himself as well as Jesus knew him. And he knows that Jesus knows him intimately. And it's saddening, but still, there's the other thing also. This is very much a negotiation game. In this culture, heckling, negotiating is important. So Jesus' prize starts with, do you love me, agape, more than these? And Peter offers what he has to offer, phileo. So Jesus brings down the prize, do you love me, agape me? And Peter says, I just have phileo, Lord. And then Jesus says, do you love me, phileo? And Peter responds with, you know all things, you know that I love you, with phileo. So it's almost like they agree on a price. And this is the price for restoration of the relationship. Because there, the third time is also said, feed my sheep. Okay, stop share. For me, it's quite clear that God is accepting what we have here. It's not demanding more than we can bring. It's just a phileo that Peter has. And on these terms, there can be a relationship again. Does not mean that God's demands are diminished. He will accept our human brotherly love. But on the basis we can offer this, God is doing something incredibly better. And here I need to bring a bit of a testimony. In the same trip I went to Hungary, I thought this is exciting. Also was told, apart from sharing on the streets and sharing in the churches and see a bit of the culture, there was also a period of 2 weeks working in a center for handicapped people run by the Reformed Church in Hungary. And up to that moment, people with a mental handicap, also a physical handicap, made me quite uncomfortable. I like very good conversations, and I find I can have a joint appreciation of a good conversation as a basis of friendship and relationship. But if I can't have the conversation, I find it hard to bind to people. I found it very hard. So the idea of working with handicapped people, especially mentally handicapped people, did not really appeal to me. it's like, okay, it's part of the deal. I will do my best in these 2-3 weeks. But when I prayed about, generally, my attitude towards handicapped people was definitely strongly rebuked. I had the words actually given to me, what you did to the least of my brothers, you did to me. And I tried to deny the idea of that handicapped people could be Jesus' brothers. And definitely God convicted me of sin in that area. Being judgmental, self-righteous, appreciating that what I was good at the expense of the value of another human being. So that was a difficult lesson. And there was a moment I had to say, okay, I realize it, but I can't this help me. It's very much like the person saying, I believe, help my unbelief. I know that God demanded unconditional love for his brothers, fellow believers, whether they were sane, not sane, handicapped, not handicapped, whether I could have a conversation with them or not, whether they were from the same church or from another church. And here it was quite difficult. Well, I was willing in the end, saying, well, okay, I will. Help me, I can't. And when we arrived actually at the place where the Center for the Handicapped was, Urbachan, I was told what we were going to serve at different wards, and I was allocated to the double handicap ward, mental, physical handicap combined. Basically, we were bred to the parts, and immediately there was this overwhelming people, lots of people, small people, with all kinds of deformities, handicaps, and a very strong smell of such an institution, which really left me helpless. And then the children came and basically asking for a hug. And that's the moment I decided to accept that God loved these people, and I was there to share God's love for them, and hug them, and touch them, look them in the eyes, and love them with God's love, because I lacked this love. This love that God actually demands from me if I want to be saved. I need to have agape love, and I didn't have it. That's the moment that God gave me this love for these people. I found out that there was an incredible difference actually for the handicapped people after they accepted Jesus in their lives. Because like everybody else, they were sinners. But when they accepted Jesus, their character changed and they became far less self-centered, just like I, when I was changed by the Spirit of God, when I became a Christian. I did not become a perfect person. I did become a person that God worked with and worked in. Sometimes, as evangelicals, Baptists, we think we have a one-time salvation, and after our salvation, we're saved and we're okay. And quickly, we may think that the others are not okay. We are the okay, they are not. But we still are sinners and do all kinds of things we don't want to do. And God is dealing with it and changing our hearts. But only if we agree that we lack and that our hard work will not do the job. That our clothes that we put on us will not cover our shame. When our hard work dragging a net of fish on shore does not mean anything because it's not changing us. It's just us trying to prove we are good workers. That is not what the gospel is about. The gospel is about that God is actually saving sinners and working in their lives as a long process, a lifelong process, which God will bring to completion. The end of it is that we die to ourselves and our life to God. As Peter was led to the place where he didn't want to go, dying the death that would glorify God. We are not all called to be martyrs, but we are all called to die to our old self and to live our new life saved, changed, glorified, yes, with the joy of the Lord, yes, but it's completely different from the old life. We are going to celebrate the Lord's Supper. And normally we have a text read for the Last Supper, but I think it's better to ask ourselves, no, ask Jesus. You know me. You know all things. You know me better than I know myself. To shine his light in our lives. Ask us the questions we need to answer. The foremost question is indeed, do you love me? Because the first commandment is, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your might, with everything that's in you. And the same second command, which amounts to the same, is love your neighbor as you love yourself. In order to be able to fulfill that commandment, we need to be changed people. We need to have the love of God poured out in our hearts and be able to love our neighbor with God's love. And love God back with the love he has poured out in our hearts. Communion is the moment that we can shine God's light. Let God shine his light in our hearts, knowing that he knows all things. So let us continue. There will be a song and then there will be communion. And Desmond and Okoko will pray and will celebrate communion, asking us these questions. Let us continue with the service.
Yeah, thanks, Huub. And thanks for the intense message about God's love, especially the drawings